Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of The Way of the Sensitive. I'm really excited to be launching this podcast with my really good friend, Jackie Stewart. Hello and welcome, Jackie.
Hi, Cara. Thanks for inviting me.
So on this first podcast, what we're going to start with looking at is working with nature and working with flower essences. And Jackie Stewart, for those of you that don't know, I've known Jackie for a few years now, and she's one of my favourite people on the planet. So this is just like going to be one of our conversations that we normally have, really. And before we go into like your specialist topic, what I always ask people to do is to invite them to say what they enjoy about being a sensitive and kind of a little bit about how that journey unfolded for them.
Yeah, it has been a journey to learn to enjoy being sensitive, because a lot about being sensitive that's tricky.
Yeah.
And it's fairly new information for me to realise that I'm sensitive and a sensitive person. And I remember, like, growing up, people would always say, oh, you're so sensitive, you're so sensitive. And I just absorbed this as a criticism and thought, oh, that's a really bad thing that I need to change. I'm too sensitive. I need to make myself harder and tougher and just more resilient. So I'd sort of absorbed this message that sensitivity was a negative. And I spent a lot of my early life, like my teens, my early 20s, trying to be really obnoxious and outgoing and like be crass and to not be upset by things and not be so moved by things.
Yeah.
It's only like in the last 3 or 4 years that I read that HSP test, how to tell if you're a highly sensitive person. I suddenly realised that all these things that I thought were an issue actually painted this picture of somebody who experiences life in glorious technicolor, you know, and the whole richness of life that we feel when we're sensitive.
Yeah.
And to be, you know, to be so moved by something, to cry easily, like not just when you're sad, but when your heart is just opened by life. And, you know, to experience the beauty and the depth of connection to nature, the depth of the connections you have with other people when you're sensitive, because you feel all the layers of everything they're experiencing. So you don't have superficial relationships. You have these rich friendships that are deep and soul deep. So it's just that real depth and beauty of life that, yeah, just ignites my heart. That's what I love really about being sensitive.
Yeah, and I think that journey is something that a lot of people would be able to kind of resonate with and understand. And my word used to be I've got to be bold, you know, and just like push through and almost like this real fight, and just be somebody who I wasn't. And it's hard to go through life thinking that you have to, well, it's impossible to go through life thinking that you have to be somebody who you're not, really.
Yeah.
So the pivot point, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say it's exhausting. And for me, what happened was, as I was trying to kind of, so it was, in one level, it was just exhausting, and I became kind of physically quite unwell.
Yeah.
And also I just felt this deep depression because I was not being authentically me. And it was, you know, I talk about it as getting really soul sick because I was so disconnected from my real self. I was trying to fit myself in a box where I didn't belong. And, you know, I had really bad migraines. I had like real exhaustion, and I just felt like life wasn't worth living. Not that I was planning to end it, but I was like, this is unsustainable. This is not life.
Yeah. And then that, I will put a link in the show notes actually to that HSP test. There's one online, isn't there? And I think that's, you know, a lot of people might find that useful. And so then it kind of helps you relate to the world in a completely different way. And I like the way that you describe the layers of being a sensitive, you know, and it does, like the images that are coming into me is like you almost walk through life seeing the different layers of life and hearing those undercurrents. And that, how do you cope as a sensitive then with all the noise, you know, like all that like sensory feedback, but also like I think you have a shared thing of just like that psychic noise that comes from what's called mass consciousness. I mean, did you use the flower essences to help you with that, or how do you support yourself with that?
Yeah, so I would say that there are particular essences that are really good for sensitives. All flower essences work particularly well with sensitive people because sensitive people are more tuned into their emotions and they're more tuned into spirit. And it's those two realms that flower essences particularly bring balance in, the realm of emotion and the realm of spirit. So all flower essences help. They help filter out what you don't want, because that's the big issue, isn't it? It's like applying a sort of filter, which means you can still engage with all the beauty and the connections, but without being overwhelmed. So essences, really helpful. Having lots of time on my own to process, which is a really big thing for sensitives, preferably outside in nature, feet in the earth, time in trees, and switching off from social media, but actively like being quite fierce about making that choice, that these aren't little things that make life a bit sweeter. These are actually essential if you're sensitive, because if you're overwhelmed, you can't function. And that's the biggest problem I see with clients who are sensitive, is that overwhelmed, so much life coming in and not being able to filter out the bits of it that aren't useful, and not being able to filter out what isn't yours.
Yeah.
Because, we're picking up on emotional content from not only ourselves, but from anybody who's in our energy field. And that doesn't just mean our physical energy field, it's anybody we might have had an interaction with in Facebook or... It's like suddenly we're feeling all their stuff, which isn't even stated, but it's that undercurrent of the emotional stuff. And choosing what you pick up and what you let go, I think, is such a big issue. And being really clear about only picking up what's yours or what somebody's asked you. Like if you're working with people in the way that you and I do, if somebody's asked you to get involved in their emotional content, so that you can be of service to those people and not have your energy diverted and filtered into all the other dynamics that you're feeling constantly, but you need to choose, this is not mine to carry. So it's really that choice and putting it down, and when you feel that you've picked it up, to actively put it down.
And so it's like it's essential self-care, which we're kind of not taught in the way that our culture's kind of set up now, is it, for hardy folk? And I remember you saying to me as well that once is, that whole idea that we are a sovereign being and we get to choose who or what is in our energy field, and that, like that language that you just said, that fierce decision. And I see a lot of sensitives struggle with letting go of people that are wounded or feeling like they know, we could just rescue, like... The rescue pattern of a sensitive. That needs a book.
Yes. Should we write it together?
So how do you claim your, like, if you have an intention or something, how do you like say, nope, it's not mine, out? That kind of declaration. What do you do?
It varies, and I think with work situations I'm pretty good at it, and I'm very clear about that. And I'm getting clearer because I get a lot of emails from people that are interested in flower essences, but they're not clients. And I could easily I could spend half an hour on a really loving, heartfelt response to every person. And I'm just finding I don't have time to do that. So it's practice. With work, it's easier. In my home life, it's harder. Practice, and also being aware of like my triggers, being aware of what's going to pull me in.
Yeah.
And it used to be I had a lot of friends who would have all these big dramas, and I would want to go and save the drama, and I would want to kind of step in and heal it and make it better and fix it. And I'm not as drawn into those dynamics, so I don't have those sorts of relationships anymore. So I think it's been really noticing what pulls you out of your own center into someone else's stuff. Because generally when there's something compelling in someone else's stuff, it's probably something in your own life that you're not looking at. There's some resonance there, and it's so much easier to kind of work with it, try and fix it at a little bit of a safe distance in someone else's life, rather than actually claim it as your stuff to work on.
Yeah.
So really noticing your own triggers and noticing, okay, where's the bit in me that I'm sort of abandoning myself because it's so much more compelling to be in someone else's material over here.
And that's the real work, isn't it? That's the work of what I call stabilizing the channel, I guess. And I like the word responsibility is coming up, and there's two dynamics to that for me. Is like, it's wonderful because I get to be fully responsible for myself, and it's like, oh shit, now I get to be fully responsible for myself. I can't blame anybody else.
And just remembering that it doesn't serve us when someone else is trying to be responsible for our stuff. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't empower us. And equally, it doesn't empower them when we get over responsible for their stuff. So it's
Yeah.
that it's a constant lifelong issue, I think, for us, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and I think that's really useful for that for people who are listening who find themselves, or they're just kind of just like, oh, I do that, and also now recognizing all this drama. Is that like the most compassionate response to that is, first of all, we don't know what we don't know until we know it, and then also it is an ongoing journey. It is, that's part of the light lessons of being here, I guess, and relationships are so rich for that. So
Yeah.
can you tell me, we had this conversation the other night, and I'm really excited to for you to share this, because I get just complete giddy knickers about this. But so you opened me my, like, you showed me a different way of understanding how florescences or flowers came about, and working with flowers. And can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So the official story around fluorescences is that they were discovered by Edward Bach, who was a medical doctor about 100 years ago, and he created the Bach flower remedies, which are still probably the most used and best known, although there are hundreds of other companies all around the world making fluorescences. So that's sort of the official story. But Edward Bach was deeply connected. Yeah, I see him as being part of the White Brotherhood. He was a native English shaman, and he was deeply connected to nature, deeply connected to spirit. And oh, I've got the tingles. I can feel him really with me now. Like,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So he was deeply connected to all that spiritual information that is available. And he was living at the same time as like Rudolf Steiner and Alice Bailey and Edgar Cayce. So it was this time of a big awakening.
mm,
So people were tapping into a lot of spiritual information in the collective, and I'm sure that Edward Bach was part of that. So that was kind of where his part of the story began. But there's been channeled writings about the origin of fluorescences. So in the 80s, there was a channel in California channeling this information from Garudis, which was all about where fluorescences really came from. So the understanding is that they actually originated in Lemurian times, and the Lemurians were these androgynous beings that originally didn't have to be male or female, because they were just this pure consciousness androgynous beings, and they were very psychic. So everything they did on the level of thought. So they thought flowers into being on the level of thought form. And it's like this kind of interaction that flowers and beings have, like, at that time it was Lemurian beings, now it's us as human beings, but flowers and people have evolved very much together. So they have grown in response to one another. And we couldn't exist on the planet now if it wasn't for flowers, for food and shelter and bees and everything. So in the Lemurian times, it was like the Lemurian beings, they practiced what they called the science of luminosity. Wouldn't you just love to go to university and study the science of luminosity?
I know, that's so cool.
A PhD in being a luminous being. So there were these luminous beings that were deeply connected. So they thought the plants into being, and as they became denser, because the Lemurian civilization lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, and as the civilization went on, they stopped being androgynous because they figured they'd learn more by being in male and female bodies, and they became denser and denser and denser until by the end of Lemuria, they then became Atlantean and then became denser and denser and denser. So as the Lemurian civilization unfolded and they became denser, they began to experience problems, like physical problems, emotional problems, spiritual problems, things that they hadn't had when they were perfect and luminous. So the flowers evolved in response to what they were experiencing. So things like bleeding heart flower, which is out in my garden just now, which is a perfect heart shape with a tiny shining teardrop beneath it, has evolved as a heart remedy from that, like that need in the beings created the flower. The flower
Wow.
responded to the need. So there is this huge synergy between us and plants. And the Lemurians were so connected, they didn't need flower essences initially. They just needed to be around a plant and they would walk past it and they would be instantly balanced. And the problem, because they weren't that dense, the problem was solved. And as humanity has evolved, we've got denser and denser and denser until we're now at this stage where I see that we are undensing, like we are becoming these luminous beings. We are, so what I see is happening is that the time will come, and it won't be too far in the future. I think in our lifetimes, when at the moment flower essences are the medicine from the plants that help us with emotional, spiritual issues, bringing balance to our systems. But within our lifetime, I don't think we'll even need to take flower essences, because we will have reclaimed our Lemurian heritage, and we will be able to just walk past them and feel their energy, and we will be instantly balanced. And, that is happening already. I can see that, because I've been teaching people how to make flower essences in workshops for probably about 10 years. And 10 years ago, people were sort of getting it, and they'd get a little bit of an instinct, when they were spending time with the flower, they'd get a bit of a hit about what it was for. Now it's just like that. It's instant. That door is open. Consciousness has changed so much that gateway is wide open. So I see us as returning to this Lemurian depth of connection with nature, where you'll just walk through a park, and every plant that you need, you will be absorbing its vibration. Walk through your garden, walk through a woodland, walk past Marks and Spencer's where all the flowers are, and you'll just be like, oh, that's just balanced my heart chakra. Oh, that's just sorted out my and it'll just instant transmission.
Yeah, and so there's a few. I love that. I love it. I love it. And there's a few things in there, particularly around like all the sensitive children that are being born and maybe diagnosed with autism or sensory processing disorder or whatever, and just like part of this wave of this new collective that's going to demand that as society we look at things differently and we make changes, or we're going to have some, more problems. And the idea of like a Lemurian just having this pure intention of thought and then physically manifesting. I mean, I like that. I want some of that. But then also listening to your, when we were talking about this the other night, it just made me look at flowers in a completely different way. But first of all, I just want to bring up the fact that I know you mentioned that there's a lot of legislation coming and people are kind of a bit panicking and about whether flower essences are going to be as available, and that empowered response that you have is, well, if that happens, then obviously we don't need them and the time is not for now. So for anybody that works with flower essences who's kind of listening in and thinking, yeah, but they're not going to be around, that's such an empowered choice. You love it.
Absolutely. Because there's been lots of changes around legislation with herbalism and homeopathy, and there's, the net is tightening, and because, I think because big pharma companies can see what a threat essences are as preventative medicine. So I think there is this feeling that the net is tightening and the legislation will get stricter and stricter. And already, last year I was making sprays using essential oils and flower essences, and now you can't do that without a cosmetics license. So, wow. People can get a bit fearful or a bit angry about that. And it's like, yeah, if you feel fearful, if you feel angry, be with the fear, be with the anger, process it, release it, do whatever you need to do with that. But there's another way. And we don't necessarily need to have flower essences if we keep doing the inner work. And for those of us who are so sensitive and who are drawn to work in these healing areas and to help others, as we keep doing the work, we become more resilient and resourced. Everybody that we work with becomes more resilient and resourced, and consciousness changes and expands, and we are wakening up. Our hearts are being opened to a completely different way of being, where that is how we speak to nature. We speak through the heart. So the more we can work with our heart wounding, let down our defenses, heal those wounds that we all carry, the more we activate our heart as that place from which we can enter into direct dialogue with nature and receive exactly the medicine that it will give us.
Yeah, wow.
So we won't need flower essences. I'll be out of a job quite soon.
Well, I was thinking we'll all be like magicians in our own houses. And I know, when I do cooking and I'm thinking about it from a nutrition point of view, and, I add this bit and that bit and this spice and that spice, it's just like, it's just like being a witch. It's the same, same principle. I have this image of us all having our own tinctures and making our own, unique blends, or however that might work. So So what I wanted to bring up is a story that kind of Jackie alluded to. It's now going to be, I think, forever my Marks and Spencer's story. But when Jackie and I were talking about this just on Saturday, I think it was, wasn't it? And it kind of already made me think about working with flowers in a different way. And I'm late to the flower essence kind of party. Because I didn't realise the depth of work that was needed to go with it when I first, like years ago, 10 years ago, I remember using Rescue Remedy and just like expecting everything to be gone as soon as I had the remedy. And it's like, why is that not working? Oh, you have to do the work as well. So, but when Jackie was talking about just being able to walk past the flowers and being able to pick them up, I told her about this flower that I'd come across in Marks and Spencer's, but I told myself I couldn't get it because it was from Marks and Spencer's. It had to be wild, untamed, or from a nursery or something. And Jackie was just like, no. So I went and got it. So this is it. And my understanding of flowers, I know Bleeding Heart because they were my nana's favourite. She had them everywhere. But my normal understanding of flowers past daffodils and dandelions are they're red ones or something. That's it. They're like cards to me. They're just like, what? But this really spoke to me the other day, and I went back and got it. All I know about it is a chrysanthemum. So you were going to kind of like help me kind of maybe tune into it a little bit or something. Shall we have a play?
Yeah, because I think there's something like there's a couple of kind of really important points in what you brought up, which is that yes, you can make flower essences from wild plants, but you can make flower essences from cultivated plants, and whatever you are drawn to is what you most need, pretty much. You know, because the world communicates with us vibrationally, and if you're drawn to a plant, it's got something for you. So I think one of the kind of things when I was first trying to understand messages from plants, I'd gone to a workshop about how to communicate with trees, and then I sat like near the river in London and was like, all right, trees, talk to me, I'm listening, and expecting the big booming voice, yeah, or expecting it to just be like a normal conversation, and then it wasn't. And the way they speak to us is very subtle, and that's why when you're sensitive, it's wonderful, because we don't just have those 5 everyday senses, but we also have these other deeper senses that are picking up the information. So yeah, I would just invite you to, as you're sitting with the plant, let me know like how you're feeling in your body.
This feels really gentle to me, and so my analytical mind is already going to like, maybe it's about opening up my next level of like gentle and sensitivity kind of. But what I'm feeling is, I guess I'm noticing the unfurling parts, the kind of reaching out and unfurling, and I have I just feel really peaceful actually, and quiet.
And if you sort of invited its energy to come and settle in your heart, almost like imagining that flower is resting in your heart chakra and opening up its petals in your heart. Yeah, closing your eyes is really good. And just ignoring what your mind's saying, because your mind probably is a bit of a distraction, and just deepening into that heart space, that flower flourishing in your heart.
Oh, that's gorgeous. That's kind of like I'd say it's a rush of joy, but it's got a feeling of expansion with it as well. It's not, it's like I want to go, and just like, I feel like you actually, look at all this world, look at all the beauty, just like, it's so amazing, and just this kind of like peaceful, gentle, but excited, joyful way of just being here and noticing things.
And do you think that quality could be useful to you in your current, where you are in your life?
Yeah, I think because it's like place. What came to me this morning in something as well is like being mindful of where you're placing your attention, and I think when you've got a lot of changes going on, the mind wants to go to keeping an eye on everything, make sure everything's ticking over, and that kind of like almost control kind of feeling. Whereas this feels like this is where I want to get to, you know. So it has that vibe of where I want to get to, and just like be with what is, but place the attention on what feels like expansive and joyful and playful.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, it's beautiful, and it just looks so cosmic. It just looks like really like, whoa, cosmic.
Yeah, it does. It's like, yeah, it's a wild little thing. I love it. It's gorgeous. Okay, well, thank you for that. So,
And that's the thing, like with flowers, they really speak to our hearts. And that would be, you know, if people are interested in experimenting with this and playing with it, like spending time with plants and just noticing what you feel. Like sometimes it'll be a real physical response. You might feel tighter or more expansive, or you might feel a resonance in a particular chakra, because different flowers will speak to different chakras, and often the colors can clue about where they relate to in the energy system. But just really like listening through the heart, feeling what you feel from the flower. You know, that's such a good way of absorbing its medicine.
that really helped in that, because you know, I can really be in my mind and analyze stuff. But then when you asked me to invite it into my heart, I could feel it land, and then it was a completely different experience. So that is something that people could just start, you know, noticing and experimenting straight away. And just before the call, I said to Jackie, I can't walk past dandelions in the same way anymore. I just used to be like, oh, you're a dandelion. And then I'm just like, feel so disrespectful doing that now. It's got so much more. So I think sometimes as well, I think we can just, you know, think that we should just be able to do something, especially if we're already a channel in another way, you know, like obviously I channel and verbally channel my guides, and you for me are the channel of spirit, you know, that, and nature spirits, that's and channels of the land. And I think you made a really good point that they don't talk in the same language that we would expect to. And I would really encourage people, if you are interested in doing this more, of actually going and working with somebody or going to a workshop or something where the person that's leading it is embodying that connection. Because I remember the first time this was about 7 years ago, and it was when I first got involved in the pagan groups. And a really good friend of mine, Nick, was, he's just a tree man. His wand is like this big, thick thing, you know, it's just like, and he's just worked with it for years. And he did this tree workshop where you just were going to get a message from the tree. And I was in that stage of my spiritual development where I experience humbling moments quite often, you know, thought I knew it all. And I remember this one moment, we were walking around these trees and he was saying, just feel into them and see what you feel. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, this is lovely. And then I walked past one tree and it just grabbed me. The sensation was it grabbed me, and I felt my energy and its energy, like if I'd have let go, I would have just fallen into it, was really powerful. And so that kind of just walking past things, if we pay attention, can really make a difference. But I think it's really supportive to be in a place and a space where the person embodies it, their energy field that they create around, you know, a workshop or an introduction, just makes that more accessible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because particularly if you're sensitive, you're picking up on that vibration in them, so that then inhabits your energy field as well. So you're in that field of that, becomes your experience.
Oh, that's such a better way of describing it. Yeah.
And I think, like, I really liked what you were describing about connecting with the trees and the point that one of them just grabbed you, because that's interesting. But also, like, not every plant has a message for us at a particular time, and it'll just feel flat and it won't feel resonant. And I think a really good entry point into connecting with plants is what I always say in workshops. It's like when you're talking to somebody you just love and you never run out of things to say, and it's just easy and it flows and there's so much communication going back and forward, compared to somebody you haven't met before and you're not sure of them and you're not sure if they like you, and it's all a bit like awkward and So it's like, choose plants that call you, that attract you, that excite you, that you feel curious about, that you feel already this kind of, your heart is racing a little bit with excitement or joy or love, because you're like, oh, I just want to know more. So you're more likely, I think, to get a good hit if there's already like a relationship, already a dynamic.
Yeah.
And, there's been so much interesting research by the Institute of Heart Math about the resonant field of your heart, and the resonant field of your heart stretches out a couple of meters beyond your body. So there's been other research which has shown that plants respond to human energy fields, and if you are looking to make medicine from a plant, the plant starts like adjusting its energy to kind of suit your purpose, because it
Wow.
so it starts giving out a different vibe because it wants to help you. It wants to be in this co-creative partnership with you. So if you think about your heart's given out this resonant field, and if you're feeling love towards the plant, and the plant's like already excited to work with you because it knows you want to, it's like you're both like really excited, so you can have this amazing conversation because you're both like really up for it.
That sounds like a love affair. That's gorgeous. I never knew
Totally.
that they responded like, yeah. And one thing that's coming into my mind is when I did the tree workshop, Nick guided us to kind of think back and see if there's a tree that we always connected with. And I was just like, no. And then I thought, like, my nana used to have a willow tree. And whenever I could, I would run and sit under that willow tree, and I'd have picnics under there. And then when I've always been drawn to willow trees, but never really paid any attention. And then when I was moving from Doncaster to Cornwall, I used to go and talk to a willow tree a lot, but I never made that connection until he said it. So I'm wondering for listeners now, is that the same? Like, I'm imagining that's the same with flowers and all of those, that there might be something that has always been tried to connect. And do we have, like, I think willow tree is always going to be around for me, but do we have that kind of, okay, you're nodding, go on.
Plant allies. You will have plant allies.
Oh, that makes me want to cry.
They will have been walking
always
by your
cry when I
side,
talk to
loving you forever. Yeah.
That's so gorgeous.
And
Right.
it's a big part of shamanic work is to discover your plant allies. And if you start to look back in your childhood and just think about plant memories, like your willow memory, and there might have been flower memories. Like I have so many flower memories of just plants that I loved that were just my friends from when I was really little. And I just know that there's been this circle of allies around me, just walking along this lifetime with me, just loving me from a distance. Yeah. And we all have them.
Okay, so that turns my head upside down with the words that you said, those plant allies, because one of the things that I wanted to bring up is about how disconnected from nature we can feel, and how you are just so at home, in nature. And I remember seeing pictures of you on Facebook with moss on your hair, and you're just in it, just like that, almost like you could eat it kind of thing, which I know we do, obviously. But that was not my experience when I first started connecting with nature. It terrified me, being brought up on tarmac, and it wasn't so much that I might be out in the wild and I might come across an unfriendly person. It was more about animals, and did I have permission to be in this place? And it kind of showed me how tamed as an individual I'd come. And paganism, when I worked with a group and we went and did casting of circles on the moors, and at midnight, and we noticed, cows with crescents on their heads would come to us, and wild horses came and nudged me in the middle of a circle, and it's just like, but at the same time, it was like a reclamation that I've got this right to claim my connection with land. And so now when you're saying that we've got plant allies, that's really making me think of it in a completely different way, because I think we've just become really cultured and tamed. So I don't know if there's any thoughts from what I'm just saying now that's coming to you. It's just, I guess it's like, how can we feel more at ease in nature? How can we stop being so frightened, and actually how can we see it as our inheritance, I think, and our heritage, I think, and that we belong to it and it belongs to us. It's like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's been, probably since the sort of industrial revolution, there has been that increasing disconnect from nature, and that's kind of we've been sort of sold this idea that it's dangerous, or that we don't belong to it and it doesn't belong to us, and we've got so disconnected from our food source and our medicine and all these things. So I think what you're saying is a really important reconnection that's needed. And in terms of beginning to, I think so. There's probably two things. There's that knowing that it is our birthright and there's nothing to be scared of, and if any fears do get triggered around spending time in nature, to just really notice the nature of the fear. Chances are there's going to be an essence that helps with that. Chances are there might have been like an early experience that fear's got kind of blocked around, and it maybe isn't even about nature, but just to kind of explore it a little bit, just to explore what's going on. And also to kind of, you can call on your allies, and also, but like not to go places that you don't feel safe. Like, I grew up in a really wild place and I played in the woods, and the woods were my playground and often felt much safer than home, actually. So I've always felt safe in nature. Yeah. And for some people that will be true. But for people who've grown up in cities, it's finding comfortable ways to engage with nature. And maybe it's going to the park, and maybe it's just doing it in the daytime, and maybe it's just choosing, a little bit of land that's next to where you live. Or, you don't, connecting with nature doesn't have to be like in the middle of Exmoor in the middle of the night at full moon. Like
Marks and Spencer's plants are a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's good to be aware of resistance, fears, and explore them, but also not to push yourself beyond your comfortable barrier.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
That resistance serves a purpose, but get curious about it, and then you will gradually become wilder and more comfortable. And for all that I grew up in nature and loved it, I had a long time living in London, and I got really cultivated, and I've lived in cities a lot, and living in cities helped me reclaim nature again for myself. And I've had really deep connected experiences in parks, like in the northwest of England, industrial northwest. So nature is everywhere. It's in a weed growing through the pavement. It's in a little bit of moss on the top of a bus shelter. It's everywhere.
And that curiosity is like a really good starting place, isn't it? Even if you just, like the way that you help me connect then, and I know when I'm out and I can see like palm energy, I call it, at the moment, and everything's leaping, and it's just, I do this with people, and it's a bit rude, but I have what I call like an autistic stare, and I'm just like that. And and I'm not staring at the person, I'm like, their energy's just really drawing me. And I can feel like that with plants. So that curiosity of like, if you did have a message, what would it be? How do I feel in relation to you? That kind of thing. Yeah. And I think you make a good point about like making what feels natural to you that kind of portal for connection. So either like the parks, and for me it was running. And I remember moments when, because I was running, I feel safe when I'm running and being out in nature. I use the what's the word? The appreciation that I feel for nature as fuel for my runs. If I'm slowing down and I can't get going, I make sure that I pay attention to nature, and just like the sea and the coconut smells that we get down here, and it really fuels me. And I think they feed us. Yeah, I really like that. So finding the thing that makes you feel safe and connected, and then expanding from there. And I mean, like you were saying, our sensitives, we need something that's a gentle way in. It can be powerful, because if you're just kind of getting used to being a sensitive as well, then you can feel like it's almost like being sensitive is weakness, when actually that's the strength, doing it in that way. Okay, so where can people kind of find you, and what's going off in your world and on the, online and in your work?
Yeah, so people can find me at flowerspirit.co.uk, and I'm also on Facebook as Jackie Flower Spirit. I'm on Twitter, JS Flower Spirit, and I'm on Instagram as Jackie Flower Spirit.
Right, I'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, so on my website there's a box where you can sign up to my mailing list, and that's a really good introduction for people because it's 6 steps, a different email a day for 6 days. And then at the end of it, you get a short guided meditation to connect with a flower that has a message or some medicine for you. So that's a really nice way to get a really personal message from the flowers. So that'd be a good way for people to connect. And
That
I'm going to
sounds
be
perfect, actually, for
yeah,
like if you want to carry on from this conversation. Yeah, sorry, you were going to say something
yeah.
else?
And I'm going to be teaching a flower essence making workshop on, I think it's the 2nd of July, and
Yeah.
that's going to be in East Lancashire, near Yorkshire, kind of up north. Um, and yeah, and I teach the flower essence practitioner diploma training course, and the next one won't start till next year because it's a long course, but there's lots of planty wonderfulness there. And then at some point I'll develop some of this into something online, but it's just finding the time because yeah, life is so rich and lovely.
Yeah. So people have got different opportunities to work at different levels, and just anybody who wants to learn. I am completely biased, but anybody who wants to learn about like a depth of connection with flowers and working with the essences and being a practitioner, then I would highly recommend you. You
Oh,
just embody it, you live and breathe it.
I just love it. Like I just love the flowers,
I can tell.
and it kind of it's weird to me that people don't have this whole kind of family of flower friends. It's weird to me that people realize they could. And like and that's there for all of us, and all
Yeah.
that resource, support and love and healing and connection. And yeah, when you discover your flower friends and your flower family, you always belong. Like
Mm.
never
Oh,
alone.
that's such a tweetable and such a really good place to have you. That's brilliant.
Infinitely treatable.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm so pleased that this is the first show, and I can imagine that people will get lots from this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
And I will see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Mwah.
Mwah.